Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wrestler Review. Because it is August and I currently am in Portugal as of this recording it ahead of time, and John is in Edinburgh, we thought we'd do a special episode, which is something we've been thinking about for a long time. Basically, me and John did the research for the Road Dogg episode, and we wanted to talk to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Christopher Hobson, and see what we did not get recorded for that episode. Sorry, I'm going to do that again because now it just says live for 7 seconds, so I'm going to see if it just recorded. Just 1 second. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wrestler Review. My name is Dylan Gott. Not joining me this week is John Hastings. We'll be joined by Christopher Hobson to do Road Dogg Part 2, the shit we missed. We thought about doing this for a very long time, but basically, when we do episodes, Christopher Hobson hands us a bunch of research, and then instead we talk about porn. So we're going to actually talk about the wrestler this time and satiate a lot of people's needs who gave the show a bad review and will never listen again. So without any further ado, Christopher Hobson, everybody.
Hello.
Great.
So, do you want me to dive straight in? Or
Please take a dive right in. So Road Dogg, here's where we got to. I will pull up our research before this, but basically, I don't remember how we started the episode, but it probably was a long diatribe about how RedTube is now the dirty porn site and Pornhub's the classy one somehow, even though they're owned by the same thing, so figure that one out. But Brian Gerard James, of course, born May 20th, 1969, and as of this recording, news came out that he was been basically begging Tony Khan for a job, and Tony Khan's been saying no.
what do you think of that, by the way? Seems a bit odd.
I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. They're all weird and sad. Also, it's like if you're like, here's what I do for a living. I'm a professional wrestling producer or road agent. Then you have so few options that if you get fired by one, then of course you'd panically ask the other one for a job. Like, this guy's got no fucking options. He's like in his late 50s, isn't he?
Yeah, he started a podcast with an extremely annoying co-host. I shouldn't say that in public.
He's 52. Yeah, he's 52, 53, Road Dogg is. Which, for a 53-year-old now, he looks like dog shit. But,
Oh, I'll try and crack on. There wasn't a lot about his childhood because, like, as you'll know, any of the second-generation wrestlers, they don't really talk about how they learned to wrestle. They were just like, my dad put me in an arm bar while I was still in the crib, so there isn't a lot there. Oh, the only thing he really said was he wanted to be a wrestler, but before he went into the Marines, he was 6'4" and weighed 165 pounds. Only put weight on it when he actually went away, and that's how he ended up in the industry. You mentioned he was in Desert Storm. The only really interesting wrinkle with that, I thought, was he was actually the member of 8th and I Marine Barracks, which were entirely ceremonial and just marched for foreign dignities and did security at Camp David. So when they went to Desert Storm, they all shit themselves. They never thought they'd get called up. So
yeah,
they got
Camp David. For those of you who don't know, that's literally the president's camp. So it's like, hey, we're just gonna like sit outside this lake and hope no one storms the lake, which they never will.
So they got given a training session on landmines, and that was it. They just thought they weren't coming back. They were going to get blown up by a landmine, which is not what you expect from a Marine training.
Well, the Gulf War too. Like, I mean, I don't know that. Like, but it seems to be the casualties were that was the first use of drones. They had that fucking war on CNN. Like, they were not worried about losing that war. They had so much more money and.
I remember in the papers at this end, this is English casualties alone, they managed to print the picture of everyone who died from our side in the Iraq War in a centre page spread in the newspaper. Yeah. So that's the level of war we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then and we're just fucking ransacking people's houses. Cool, fun.
More fun stuff.
Fun light comedy.
When he was in Smoky Mountain, which of course you mentioned, he met Robert Kellum, who competed as the maestro in Smoky Mountain, USWA, and WWC. and the pair built a ring at Kellum's house and basically taught each other to wrestle. So that's the only real sort of training he mentions. But he's already in the business for like a few years before that happens.
Wrestling, like everything else, is just like at the end of the day, it's a pyramid scheme. Like teaching people to wrestle is a pyramid scheme because the guys who get trained aren't the ones who already have someone in wrestling. If you already have an in wrestling, like an uncle or a cousin or your dad does it, then you just get taught by them and pay nothing. Or if you're just like, some kid, then you get fucking scooped for $5,000 by the maestro.
So he's in Smoky Mountain and he's jobbing in WCW. He never has a contract in WCW. What he has is he gets paid $350 a week and allowed to work the indies. So he wrestles Steve Austin while he's jobbing in WCW. There was one story from that where Austin shot Brian off the ropes and called backdrop for the spot. And Brian says he's only ever taken 2 backdrops in his entire career. He's 6'4". He says, like, when he goes out on the road, everyone talks about how tall he is because he was standing next to people like Kane. But basically, one of the only times he took a backdrop, his legs hit the rope and he landed on his head. So instead of taking the backdrop, he just front face locked Austin without telling him and suplexed him. When they crumpled on the floor, Austin just said, "I guess you didn't like the call, kid." He says jobs never bothered him. It's not really that interesting. You didn't mention that he had a couple of matches against Terror Rising.
Oh yeah, he wrestled Triple H.
Yeah.
Which is like, it is so weird that, only in the 90s would a dude be 6'4" and he's still okay to be a jobber. Like, if this dude is in wrestling now, do they like have to make the Road Dogg a power guy?
We were talking. I was talking about this yesterday. Someone with Tatanka as well. You would imagine Tatanka came out on AEW now. It'd be like Wardlow.
Wardlow, yeah, he would be Wardlow. How big is Wardlow? I want to put bets in. How big do you think Wardlow is? I'd say he's 6 feet tall, probably. He's probably like literally me, but like on steroids and a very strict diet. Now, I'm not saying that I like in any way have Wardlow's genetics. I'm just saying that like size-wise, he's probably like 6 feet 230. He's like an NFL running back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and this is gonna sound weird, but I bet he's not that far off the same size as Bret Hart, which is like weird.
Big.
Yeah.
People forget like how big Bret Hart is.
I mean, I have stood in a ring with X-Pac, not to face him, but he dwarfed me as well. So
really?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm 6 foot, 5'11", 6 foot. So I mean, it's not that short.
Much taller than you?
X-Pac dwarfed me. Yeah, they're all
so fucking weird. I remember my friend, he's 5'9", and he was stood next to Christopher Daniels, and he said, he's like, I would like a power opponent for Christopher Daniels. Like, that's how he is. I would be like using a choke slam.
So they worked a lot with. He teamed up with Brad in WCW. They worked a lot with Pretty Wonderful, and he said that Paul Orndorff used to beat the crap out of him. And cool. He also said he tells on his story a story on his podcast about Paul Orndorff hitting him so hard with the forearm he can't remember the rest of the match, which is like not very respectful to the idea of CTE.
Also, like, I fucking hate wrestling. How they're like, this guy was tough in this planned match. He just punched me as hard as he could, so he could beat up people. That's a connection wrestlers always make, where it's like, so he could beat people up in a real fight because when I allowed him to punch me in this fake thing, he did it for real and it hurt a lot. It's like, yeah, man. If you give anyone a free swing with a bat, they're gonna hurt you.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, Paul Orndorff with one arm did knock down Vader, but then Vader made a good point about that, which is like, what am I going to do? Fuck this guy up with one arm? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like,
well, I mean, this is jumping ahead, but I might as well mention it now. Road Dogg also tells.
Don't make this linear. Don't fuck this up by making it linear, Chris. Fuck.
Road Dogg also says that when he wrestled Vader for the first time, Vader just beat the shit out of him, and he had to ask his brother what to do about it. And his brother said, "You got to win his respect, you got to beat the shit out of him. So he just flipped one of the spots and landed as many punches as he could to his head. And after that point, he was fine. So exactly the same thing happened with Vader.
I love Vader because I think that mask is the best one in wrestling history because it's literally like this guy's in a muzzle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is like I never liked the connection when Vader would take his mask off during the match. It was just because he was a tired piece of shit. Like I always thought if he took the mask off, it should be like, oh, the muzzle's off. Now he's fucking crazy. But yeah, it sounds like Vader is A through Z a guy who you wouldn't want to work with because he's bigger than you and just punches you as hard as he fucking can.
But also, fascinatingly, he seems to be a soft kitten backstage, from what I've heard, or unless I've got that wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the Foley book, where it's like Vader buying the expensive sunglasses and then eating like a full sub in the front of Foley's car, talking about how excited he is about wearing the sunglasses. But like, also, you know, he's a bully. So.
Yeah.
Once again, this is a planned match. Like taking free shots on someone, as part of a plan. Just learn to throw a fake fucking punch. It's not that hard. Anyway,
no, it is the whole idea of what you're doing.
It is the entire, and Road Dogg has good fake punches.
Yeah. So he once almost beat the shit out of Sags backstage because he heard him. He didn't really know the Nasty Boys, and he heard him badmouthing his dad. So he grabbed the boss man's nightstick and sort of creeped around the side of him in a pincer movement. Dennis Knight had to stop him. He's got quite the temper, but you only really, in his early days, does Road Dogg. He has a lot of run-ins with people. So during his time in WCW, he forms a band with Nick Patrick, Max Payne, or Man Mountain Rock, and an independent wrestler called Dr. Squash, and I think there's a few other members, and that was called Living Insanity. And they had an open house because they wanted the band to be something on WCW, but Bischoff said, no, we're a wrestling company. I don't understand what you're trying to do. So Man Mountain Rock got them a tryout with the WWF. That's how he gets into the WWF, and he has two parts to his tryout. It says on Wikipedia, and this does happen, that he beats Barry Hardy in a dark match. But at the same time, he goes backstage with Vince, Gerald Briscoe, Pat Patterson, and Bruce Pritchard, and he sings while Max Payne plays acoustic guitar, and they sing What's Going On by Four Non-Blondes and Plush by the Stone Temple Pilots. And apparently this excites everyone because they've been looking for a singing wrestler for some time.
That's crazy. Because here's how we replace Hogan. Make him sing.
It doesn't really come up a lot throughout the... I mean, obviously it's going to be central to the gimmick he's about to go into, but after that point, they don't really use it, do they?
It seems like maybe the roadie was, and this is going to sound weird, but like, in Vince's mind, it's the unrealized potential of the Honky Tonk Man, because you remember the Honky Tonk Man was supposed to be a babyface character, and then they made him a heel because he couldn't sing and people were just annoyed by him. But Vince just always keeps those nuggets in his head. It's great that there's an alternate reality where, like, the Honky Tonk Man comes in after the Attitude Era when Vince has consolidated the wrestling world, and we just have to watch the Honky Tonk Man be a babyface. Because Vince is like, no, he's a fucking babyface. Fuck you, stop fucking booing him.
I want to be in that meeting, having seen his shoot interviews. In fact, having recommended his shoot interviews for people who want a bit of insanity. That meeting where Vince and the Honky Tonk Man were sat there and he was just talking to him, getting to know what his character was. And he went, yep, this guy's a born babyface. Where did that come from? Like...
It's fucking crazy. I mean, but Vince is nuts. I mean, as we're going to learn, like, we did that whole year on McMahon. We're recording this a couple weeks ahead. By the time we're recording this, there could be apparently there's another Wall Street Journal thing coming out, and it's going to be, like, worse than the other two. Which, remember, like, I've said this maybe on the show before, but we all thought when the next Hogan thing came out, he's like, yeah, he fucked Bubba the Love Sponge's wife. What could the next thing be? Oh, stuff that's so racist, it's just like the Ku Klux Klan's thesis statement on their website, where it's like, I do not, write this down, think black people are equal to white people. Like, that's what he's... Write this down. No slang. I don't want to have any slang. I don't want to use any racial slurs because then I'll dilute the point I'm trying to make.
I mean,
we are superior. I'm an Irishman. My name is Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Write this down.
I mean, you can cut this out if you want, because I don't know if it's controversial. But imagine we were sat together and one of us did something, and your reaction to it was, "I will pay you $3 million to never tell anyone that happened." Well, how bad would that thing have to be? Like
Not even that. I have a contract ready because I anticipated doing something this heinous. He just must have because they said that Michael Jordan used to do that in the 90s, is that he would cheat on his wife, and he basically was like, the girl would sign the NDA and then they would have sex, but he would never have sex with them before the NDA. Like they'd be like, oh, I want to sleep with Michael, or I want to meet Michael Jordan, and then their lawyer, which this it's actually scarier than what Vince McMahon did. But imagine hey, I want to meet like your super, you meet one of your heroes, whatever. And then they were like, imagine, you know what? Reverse the genders. Imagine if you, Christopher Hobson, were like, I'm going to meet Beyonce today, and you're getting backstage because Beyonce is into you. Beyonce is into your type. And then you have to, and then Beyonce's lawyers are like, sign this NDA. You'd be like, Beyonce's going to fucking kill me. Beyonce's just going to spit in my mouth and then cut my dick off and throw me at a window.
I think that people just must not some people must not register what an NDA is. Legally, I need you to not talk about what's going to happen. It must just not click in their brain or something.
If you talk about what is going to happen, you're fucked. You're fucked forever. Other thing I wanted to mention though, his dad didn't just get him in the WWF, or he didn't have much help from his dad. Then his dad just kind of was like, I guess if you have that many sons in wrestling, you can't help everybody.
It's I think it's always unclear with this, when you've got a family with this many wrestlers and generations in it, what's actually happened. Like I said at the beginning, it's just like I was going to be a wrestler was basically it. And
I guess at the end of the day, you already have the help because you're Bob's kid. Do you know what I mean? Where it's you already know everybody from your childhood, and you just get these connections because you already have you're born with the fucking in.
Well, Bob, the only thing he says his dad's great and he was a great man to look up to. So, but the only other thing he says was Bob was more proud of him going to Desert Storm than he was his New Age Outlaws run, which is kind of normal.
That makes sense.
So, yeah. So it did.
I mean, I don't know which one I'd be more proud of, the New Age Outlaws, because even though it's just basically hey, I monetized calling people gay. Killing people in a third world country who just try to live their life.
But it's what I mean is when
that must be crazy, the day where your fucking country figures out you have oil. Oh no, I'll be here in days. Fuck, hide the oil. Don't sell it. Put it back in the earth.
Yeah, it is. What I mean by making that point is it doesn't seem like a Grizzly Smith situation. He seems to have a normal relationship with his father by everything you can link. Yeah, I mean, he never talks about that. What I'll link to this, and I don't know if saying I find this interesting is the right thing to say, but he never talks about. Everyone else seems to have a story about how they got into drugs, whereas Road Dogg's just I was just on pills, man, for right from the beginning. I just, I mean, if you've been to Desert Storm and you've grown up in a wrestling family, I don't mean to. Cast
also, this is the other baseball. Major League Baseball had a huge problem with cocaine and amphetamines up until, I'm assuming they still do, because you just need to be you need to be sharp all the time, because baseball is just a series of fine moments. I assume cricket's like this too, where it's just a series of defined moments. The action isn't constantly happening. And Desert Storm seems like the same thing, which is a weird, but you're just sitting there and then someone's shooting at you. There's that switch where it's you're on now. So it seems like a breeding ground for speed and amphetamine.
Well, as well, and this seems like an odd point to make. I'd always associated him as a heavy cocaine user, and he does admit that he'd used cocaine heavily, but he said what he was really into, they always seem to say, was downers, like somas and painkillers and stuff like that, which I didn't know. But he said he has anxiety, and I'm like, damn straight, you've got anxiety, but you went to Desert Storm. How could you not come back with anxiety?
Also, it's a fucking thing. Me and John had the same thing where when you're in the gig economy, It's not like Uber. You don't just turn on a fucking thing and then, oh, now I'm wrestling again. It's like every single. You're just waiting for a phone call. Like, you don't even have the email to, like, refresh. You just look at the phone all day and wonder if you can pay your bills or you're going to have to get a job. Like, and the other one thing about Road Dogg that I guess made him, it was a good decision, but also, like, kind of sets him apart from the others is that he went to the Northern promotion. Like, he really very, very briefly was in WCW, but he caught on with Vince really quickly and then was in the Northern promotion. He didn't use his dad's, like, any of his dad's influence.
Even when, because I did this research with, one interview on pills and then the rest not on pills to have some balance. But even when he was on pills and saying some of his sizzling hot takes, as you'd say, he was still like just wanted to work in WWE, WWF. He didn't seem to ever have any aspirations to go anywhere else. And he's exactly that style of wrestler, not to go all Meltzer as well. Like he's if you watch his interviews, he's fully aware that he has no physique. And he said, "Oh, if I had to have a physique, I'd just get another job." He is perfectly suited for the WWF. In fact, I'm sure I remember, because it was the dark days, it's the early days of the internet when Road Dogg was around. He's got a bit of crossover that McMahon was really, really high on him, and at one point, I'm sure they were talking about how far he could possibly go. I mean, he was in the way of that, but I don't know if at one point they were actually trialing him when he was the IC title to see if he could go that one stage higher. But I don't.
I think that as far as body goes, you kind of cap yourself at Jake the Snake for him, just because he is pretty much exactly Jake the Snake, but with a good father. Like, if Jake the Snake had a good father, he'd just have a crazy bad pill addiction. Like, that's it.
You'll like this. I think you'll like this. So they have a spot with William Shatner on Raw, which Road Dogg's quite high on for getting them over. So Shatner, Bret Hart's having his feud with Jerry Lawler, and Jeff Jarrett's involved, and Shatner basically slams the roadie on a turnbuckle, and Road Dogg credits this with getting him over. But backstage, he and Shatner had a little verbal altercation in Vince's office, where he
cussed out William Shatner.
And he said he'd been drinking, and he said he knows he'd been doing other stuff, and he christened Shatner Whiskey Nose Willie. So
wait. So William Shatner came in fucked up. This is the crazy thing, though, where it must be like you're a celebrity and you're like, everyone gets you pumped up and you're kind of mad at yourself that you have to do this wrestling thing for money. But then, like, the wrestlers will not take any subtle slights against their thing, and they just want to fucking beat the shit out of you. But then Vince basically makes it so they don't. There's a lot of these one-off wrestling guys from the 90s who you can see, you're like, oh, you're treated like shit backstage, or they preemptively treated you like shit even though you weren't a dick.
I mean, I've seen some of the films that Shatner's been in, though. Like, he's done a lot worse than wrestling.
Oh, buddy. He was in so there's this very... You'd only know him if you were literally Canadian, but Louis Riel, who led a indigenous revolt in 1800s? It must have been the 1800s. Late 1800s, he led an indigenous revolt in what we now call Manitoba, which is just one province over from where Brock Lesnar resides in Saskatchewan. And William Shatner was in a movie about Louis Riel, and he's maybe the most flippant thing I've ever seen. Like, it's crazy. It was produced by the Canadian government, and William Shatner's there just like... You could see him reading the script. Like, he looks into the camera, and then he just looks over at the script and doesn't, like, say the script. He reads it mentally and then says that into the camera. It's fucking awesome.
I'm completely digressing, but I guess that's the format of the show. I've seen him in a, are you aware of the big budget Krampus film that has, is it Adam Scott? Is Adam Scott the right from Parks and Rec in it?
Krampus film.
Krampus.
Krampus. I'll look it up right now.
Well, there's one big budget Krampus film that has...
Krampus, of course, is the evil Santa from Germany.
Yeah. And then there was a whole bunch of cheap ones, and William Shatner's in one of them as a drunk radio host while Krampus goes mad during the night. That's one of the worst films I've ever seen, and I review wrestling on a weekly basis.
Yeah, you've seen the Powerbomb, Masters of the Powerbomb fucking vignette from the 90s.
So trying to get back on track, but not linking it to William Shatner in any way whatsoever. So once when
needed, by the way, you can just start talking.
Jarrett was wrestling Razor Ramon with Rhodey on the outside, and they were doing the spot where Rhodey stands on the apron, ignores him, and Razor beats him down, and he was lying outside, and someone was coming up to him, and then he thought was some sort of rib and started punching him with light punches he thought were worked, but then it turned out that it was actually a fan, and Jarrett and Razor had to shout, "Get him!" So he beat the shit out of this fan, and in the resulting furore, the fan's wife jumped the barricade as they were arresting him and punched Tom Pritchard in the face, giving him a black eye, and they ribbed Tom Pritchard for weeks afterwards. So,
woman punched you? Is that the rib?
Yeah, that's the rib.
Thanks for helping. Just like, you got punched. Man, docs have sick sense of humor. It's fucking good sense of humor.
So the reason he just disappeared from WWF TV at this point is that Jarrett and Brian were moaning to each other about payoffs backstage all the time. So, like, there was, for example, one match that they were going to tour in Germany that was, I think it was the Rhodey and Jarrett against Razor Ramon and Kevin Nash. But Shawn Michaels got injured, so they had to sub in Sid into that tag match, and they said he made the tag match worse, which you can well imagine, and got paid about six times more than them. So they were steadily winding each other backstage, and Jarrett was talking about walking out after the In Your House. So in this In Your House, he's facing Shawn Michaels for the IC title, and what's meant to happen is the Roadie's meant to turn on Jarrett at the end of the match, and then they're meant to have a three-way for the IC title. But instead, Jarrett just storms out, and Rhodey goes with him, and he says it's about pay, but it's also he got drug tested on that day, saying he was dirty as hell to boot, and he felt he was being victimized, but says in retrospect, maybe not, because he was the new guy and also on drugs all the time, so of course he was going to get tested.
That's so... But also, you're the roadie.
Yep.
Hey, I'm the roadie, I need more money. Like, if Fandango was like, give me more fucking money. And even Fandango would have a way better case for more money, because Fandango was over. So that's actually a bad example. I can't think of anyone who's got, like, a worse character than the roadie. Like, I'm a roadie that fights.
It's a bad character.
Not even, like, a real roadie. Like, a real roadie would be kind of intimidating. Just a guy covered in dirt and just, like, weird genes who, like, just wants to tell you about living off the land or, like, how to not pay taxes. Like, that's a good character. And just, like, real roadies are just, like, 5'8". They never stop smoking a cigarette. They literally never take a breath that doesn't have nicotine in it. And they fucking, like, just tell you about bands they open for. And then... a lot like shoot interviews tell you about funny stories that are just crimes that they've seen. Haha, I bet this funny story where I smuggled an 8-year-old into Russia.
It's not just a bad character, it's a bad character at the time when someone's about to stand up backstage and point out how shit all this stuff is as well.
Yeah. Mantar had enough. Mantar needed a better payoff.
So he goes and he tours Germany, where he said he got jacked up on the sauce just to survive as everyone beats the shit out of you. And then he went to USWA because he had a hookup with Jerry Lawler.
Of course.
And he was living in Mississippi with his soon-to-be ex-wife. He had a marriage. He had what he called a military marriage, in that he got married because they were both scared shitless he was going to die, and then came back and they were like, maybe this wasn't the best decision. He partnered with Tracy Smothers. He won the USWA heavyweight title and the TV title. He had a feud with Brian Christopher that he said did really well and taught him about ticket sales for the first time. He saw directly how he'd affected the gate. And before that, he was sort of going through the motions, but that taught him a lot. He had his feud with Jarrett in USWA, which he says, pretty much was a waste because they had great matches, but no one wanted to see it, and they should have done it in the WWF. Mm-hmm. He said he was never contacted by ECW and he was never contacted by WCW, though Jarrett went. He reasons that even back then, that people knew he was trouble, basically. So they didn't reach out to him.
Interesting that he wasn't contacted by ECW because he seems like the perfect dude for ECW, where it's like he's got a good work rate. You can hide him by just smashing shit over people's heads. But also, he'd be a weird thing where it's like you see Road Dogg versus Taz, and Taz is like dwarfed by Road Dogg. You know what I mean? Like, yes. So it'd be like there's some of those guys where it's like just you can't be that much bigger than my big guys. Which is Billy Gunn's like that too. I feel I'm like anytime I see Billy Gunn on AEW TV, I'm like, this guy doesn't add as much as he takes away because he's so much fucking bigger. Like Billy Gunn was like probably be like twice the size of Wardlow if they were in the same ring.
As a digression, but I didn't see ECW growing up. I saw Taz for the first time in the WWF, and he came out, and I was like, "This guy's great, but he's 3 foot tall. Like, what's going on here?"
That's what the thing always thing was like. It makes sense with his name because the Tasmanian Devil wasn't huge in the fucking Looney Tunes. The whole thing is like this guy's short and stout and he can throw people. So like, why does it matter how big he is? But
it shouldn't have mattered how big anyone was. But that's not who was running.
Road Dogg. What else happened with Road Dogg? Did he fuck?
Oh right. So Road Dogg, he comes into the WWF. They give him the real Double J gimmick, which he says is the shit, but he'd have come out dressed as the Turd, called the Turd, and used the Sphincter Bomb as a finisher if he meant his baby could wear diapers and eat well, which I thought was a good quote. He said he liked S.O. Rios, but he was incredibly homophobic, but maybe that's why he liked him, which I assume was a joke, but that was in a pre-pills interview.
So there was someone who was so homophobic that they were too homophobic for the Road Dogg. A guy who like said so much fucking buck wild shit in TNA when it's like, oh hey, we're not gonna check you. You could just say whatever you want on a promo. Oh okay, cool. I'm gonna try and get the crowd to kill this man for being gay.
Oh, then there's I think I can do this off my head, and I've just flipped down in the research. It's like it's taught me doing this on a microphone what you have to go through. So.
Oh yes.
So the only time he refused to do a job was when the original ECW invasion, when Rob Van Dam and Sabu were going to come in. They were going to beat him in a match and beat him down. And Road Dogg basically said, "That's what I'm going to be here tomorrow. Why are you putting those people over?" Which, I mean, I guess it's a logical point. But
he's still the roadie.
No, he's Jesse James. Yeah, the real Double J at this point.
Okay, I think the real Double J can take a fucking loss.
Yeah.
Guys, but anyway.
But this broke down into Vince telling Rob Van Dam and Sabu one finish to the match, and and Jesse James the other, which infuriated him. So he went to Gerald Briscoe and said, "Tell Vince if he wasn't man enough to tell one of them a finish they didn't like, he wasn't going to do the match at all." So they switched him to a 3-minute squash match, the Brooklyn Brawler. But as Jesse James walked out, Vince just walked past him and shouted, "Don't you ever doubt my manhood again." So then Road Dogg goes to Vince's office after the match and waits there all night, and Vince never appears at all. So he ends up ringing him first thing the next morning and say, you fly me out to Titan Towers so I can whip your ass in the parking lot. And in which case, apparently, Vince backs down, and this is pilled up Rody, by the way. I think it's fair to say, says that he thinks Vince actually respected him a lot more after that run-in, which kind of, I know, because you read that and you don't doubt it either. You don't, he said that, and I was like, yeah, he probably did. He probably did respect you more after you did all of that.
Once again, you did the research for the year of Vince. Remember that, like, this guy's childhood was literally race fights and molestation. Like, Vince McMahon is fucked.
So then he's, he begins a feud stroke. He gets all the stuff with the Honky Tonk Man goes on. He has one run-in with the Honky Tonk Man where he tells Honky...
because was he managed by... No, Billy Gunn was managed by the Honky Tonk Man.
Yeah,
fucking crazy. It's like if the Legion of Doom was like fucking.
well,
No, your character is an actual hawk. You have to fly. Pretend to fly to the ring.
well, I think basically what happens, I can sum up this, is the Rockabilly and Jesse James have a gimmick so bad that no one backstage actually gives a shit what they're doing, to the point where they'd go out for matches on house shows. They'd try and pop the crowd, and whoever popped the crowd loudest got to win the match. That's how little supervision they had. They were deciding who won the match themselves. There's a whole storyline. Yeah. There's a whole storyline where Honky Tonk Man's going to take one of them on as a protege, and basically the whole time they're lobbying Vince Russo backstage to say, can we become a tag team, because we just want to be a tag team, which Brian says later on is one of his pet peeves, because you don't come up to creative backstage and say that. You have to have a story as well. So, but they lobby him, and then he worked Brian Pillman. Obviously, it was extremely sad because he used to hang out with Brian Pillman, Brian Lee, Brian Billy, Brian Pillman, and Brian Lee. It was three Brians, which would be difficult enough when you're not on pills. All hung out together. So obviously,
I mean, yeah. It's extremely sad that that guy who I used to do tons of pills with, like, you know what I mean? Like, that is sad, but it's like that must have been a wake up call for him at least at some point.
Well, he said it wasn't. He said he's very honest about. Now. Yeah. He was like, well, that's not. He just thought that was him. It isn't going to be me.
That's fucking crazy. That's fucking insane. But I mean, that's the Warriors mentality. That's what those Instagram memes are all about. Rise and grind, 3 a.m. on pills. I don't remember the rest of the day. My schedule is 3 a.m. ? Bed sometime. Wahlberg schedule.
Yep.
So any stories about the New Age Outlaws or anything, or is this and is the source material for this I Love Cocaine and I'm in TNA?
No. We've got so we go into the New Age Outlaws. I mean, I basically told you how the New Age Outlaws happened. They lobby Vince Russo over and over again. And Road Dogg immediately changes his look. If you look at when he comes out, the Honky Tonk Man's trying to get Rockabilly to join up with him. Road Dogg's got a black and white, more modernized look. He gets Billy to join up with them. They become a team. You didn't know your ass, better call somebody. That was something they used to say backstage. So I think Brian Lee and the racist twins, the Harris brothers, they used to say that. So he used that, and he used Michael Buffer as the inspiration for the rest of his spiel coming out. So then they go into a feud with the well, they don't go straight into a feud. They wrestle the new Blackjacks, which Road Dogg loved because he was a massive Barry Windham mark. But then they start wrestling with the Legion of Doom. When he was on pills, he said the Legion of Doom were exactly as dangerous as you'd imagine. When he was off pills, he said, maybe we were the younger team and they were the older team, and maybe they had to worry about us. And he said that once during a match, Hawk just full punched him in the face, and he just stormed out and went backstage. And Jack Lanza said,
lose for the first time in their
yeah. He said Animal was not happy about them losing, and he could understand. Even when he was full on pills, he could understand why. Because he's got a sense of heritage about him in the business, so he probably would say, well, they are the Road Warriors. So he came backstage, and Jack Lanza asked what the hell he was doing, and he said, oh, Hawk's just punched me in the face. He said, well, I guess Billy can take the finish then, huh? And he just said, no, I'll go back out in a minute, and went back out. So they win the tag titles, and then they go on to they have the dumpster feud against Cactus Jack and Terry Funk as Chainsaw Charlie. So Road Dogg says he feels like he made it when he won the tag titles off the Road Warriors, which, by the way, I neglected to mention, because Animal didn't like the fact he won the tag titles, he wore the tag title backstage to wind him up the entire time, including in the cafeteria. He wore it in the airport, and he set it up in his car as well, so everyone could see it while he was driving around.
Road Dogg.
Road Dogg did, yeah.
Road Dogg did that to make Animal mad. That seems
Yeah.
like really kind of like opposite behavior. It was like, oh, I can understand why they were antagonizing. I was directly antagonizing.
Yeah. So he said in the match against Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie, they tried to beat the shit out of Terry Funk and got nowhere with it whatsoever. His actual quote is, "We wanted to prove we were the young bucks, but Terry Funk took over and proved that we were just the young fucks." So,
Nice.
but he says
I
that
don't understand though. Like, so in the planned fight, they punched him for real, and then
yeah,
Terry Funk punched them better for real.
yeah.
That's so wrestling's so fucking stupid back then. I mean, I get it kind of because like you do need that dissidence where you're like, yeah, I mean, I might be playing a human toaster, but I can really fight, and then that just like sells your character somehow. Whereas now it's like, oh no, it's a sequence, and there's parts of this play that we're doing.
Boil it down to the what the people want to hear. What will they want to hear? So Road Dogg and Billy Gunn did not get on backstage because Road Dogg was pills and Billy Gunn liked to work out. And the first time they shared a hotel room together, Billy just woke up to Road Dogg pissing in the air conditioner, so they didn't share a hotel room for a while after that.
We didn't get along because Billy Gunn was one of the first people to do keto, and I was one of the first people to do lean.
They were extremely excited to get into DX, as you would be, and they got courted. They said, like, I didn't get to his podcast where he might have done a come to Jesus on the Nation of Domination skit. So I'm not sure what he said there, but he certainly said in the Pills interview.
Blackface. We didn't even talk about the blackface. He was in blackface in Ms. Arc when fucking good lord.
Yeah. This is off Pills as well. He hated Sable. He only talked to her 3 times, and he was mocking Mark Miro for his pyro backstage, who knew from being Johnny B. Bad. And he said, "Why don't you just stick a sparkler up your butt and run to the ring?" And Rena said, "Well, at least he's got pyro." And Brian either said or thought, "Fuck you," and never spoke to her again.
Hey, your pyro sucks. At least he has pyro. Fuck you. That doesn't sound like that sounds like that Miss Rena Mero hit a nerve super easily, and you got pissed.
I mean, there's a lot of like this sums up. So he had a run-in with Steve Austin about Steve Austin refusing to work Jeff Jarrett, but he had a second. It wasn't really a run-in with Steve Austin. It was a run-in with Jim Ross because Jim Ross had upgraded Deborah to first class, which, like Brian says, he's fine, but have your tag champions in first class as well. So he went to Jim Ross, and Jim Ross said he hadn't actually upgraded Deborah, and then he found out he had. So he called him a fat lying piece of shit and said if half of his face hadn't fallen off, he'd punch him in the other cheek, and told him to never speak to him again if ever needed anything, to have someone else call his house. But he then also he flew first class from that point on. So
threaten your boss. I mean, yeah. This is the crazy thing about Road Dogg. What we're learning is his wild threats really do get him advanced in his industry.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's all set up for that. So I think the one story from the invasion of WCW the listeners of this podcast will want to hear was that he bought weed from a Rastafarian during the segment, forgetting he was mic'd up the whole time.
When?
Like while they were filming the DX invasion, he went off at some point when "gotta score me some weed," forgot he was mixed up, and everyone in the truck heard him buying the weed. Oh, and also they almost got arrested as well because there were bags of pills in their rent-a-car, and they just had to claim they weren't theirs. So
jeez,
that's what.
So wait, when they got, that's so funny. So when they were on Turner property, they were like, "Oh, send the cops out," and then they forgot to like, "Oh, we have like a distributor's amount of somas in the back seat." That's so fucking good, man.
So when he did his, he didn't like working solo at all. But the first time he was ever comfortable working was his hardcore run. But eventually they just got begged to get back together. I mean, this is when you go in. I won't go through the dates because it'll just be tedious for the audience. But
they got TNA stuff like.
I
All the TNA stuff seems to be insane, where it's like, we're going to give you this money, and you
Yeah.
can kill anyone you want. Because we don't write the show.
There's I didn't get a lot of good TNA stuff.
So I guess, like, why would he do a TNA retrospective? That might be coming up, just to be like, put some shine on him now, before maybe he gets hired back.
It's sad, but he was super good friends with Owen Hart for the 6 months before Owen Hart passed away, and when they were at Over the Edge, he had to wrestle Billy after it happened, and he saw that Owen was dead before he went to the ring.
Jesus
he saw
fucking Christ.
So, and he says he's got an 8x10 frame picture of Owen in his house. He says he's only got a picture of two wrestlers, him and Owen Hart. And he said
Did Meltzer judge the rest of that show?
I don't know. I can't imagine.
Segment 6. Man plummets to death. Segment 7. Road Dogg and Billy Gunn have a lackluster match. 2 stars. Unmotivated. Because their friend had just died and they just learned it. Fine. But that doesn't mean you have to do a rest hold for 3 whole minutes.
And I'll be honest in terms of preparing this show. So if we go behind the curtains, I had 17 pages of research.
17?
17. But I hadn't even begun to cover, because this is a man that shits shoot interviews. So I could probably have got another 17 out of it. And then when I deleted what you'd covered in the show, it went down to 16. but there is a lot of dates of wrestling matches. I think we've covered the fun stories so far. I think in 2001 it just gets dark. He said he went backstage. He went backstage. He was divorcing from his wife. He said he knew he was on a path to death, and he asked to take some time off. He had what?
Fired then.
Yeah. He had what he thought was a positive meeting, and then 3 days later, Ross rang him up and released him. So, and he says when he's on pills, and I don't know if because he says some things when he's on pills, and I think you said this in the interview where you're like, well, that's not wrong. I mean, something I didn't read about the Nasty Boys was he told the Nasty Boys story in both the pills era and the non-pills era. And in the pills era, he says that the Nasty Boys were pieces of shit that should never have drawn a dime in the industry. And in the post-pills era, he says we're all good friends now, and I went to Liverpool with them a few weeks ago. So there's like a stark difference.
But that's the thing, though. This is the thing I think about. Like some of your source material is shoot interviews, which is good, but like, there is a certain amount of wrestlers where it's like, this is another thing that I'm performing on. I am a performer, so I'm going to perform this shoot interview, and I want to do another one, so I have to make mine good enough that they have me back for another one.
Well, I think if I'm, again, going to go behind the curtain, it is a choice to do it off shoot interviews, but when you are researching wrestling as opposed to everything else, you just go in
no one
with the...
cares about wrestling.
Well, no one cares about wrestling, but also everyone's a liar, and everyone's job is to be a liar as well. So,
It's the steroid trial where, like, the U.S. government's like, well, they'll tell the truth. They're on the stand. It's like, you've never met carnies?
So... what I actually do, and I saw a bit, Meltzer talked about it a bit when we did the Meltzer interview, is I choose to use the shoot interviews, and I've just got to say, well, I personally think that that's bollocks, or that contradicts this other thing that I found. But it's not like you could say shoot interviews aren't a reliable source whatsoever, but I don't know what your backup is for wrestling, because even,
there is none. But, like, I think it's worth saying that, like, when this guy shoots off at the hip on a fucking, when he's in a dark period of his life, especially in TNA where it's like you need another source of income because TNA doesn't pay well enough. So that is the Road Dogg Part 2. Thanks so much for joining us, Christopher Hobson. We'll try and do this other times when we under-research something. You can tell us times the guy tried to fight his boss and it worked out. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll be back next week with some goddamn episode. I don't know. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.